Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today's pre-recorded webinar series hosted by the Workforce Education and Development and Organization Development and Change Program at the Pennsylvania State University. This pre-recorded session is a part, or let's say those sessions are a part of our monthly webinar series. My name is Marcia Ruimel, and I'm a doctorate student in the Workforce Education and Development Program at Penn State. I will be moderating today's webinars alongside with colleagues Asa Al-Hajri and Halima Hatta, who are also doctorate students in the same program, and Jose Zandoval, PhD candidate in the Learning Design and Technology program at Penn State. We are excited to engage you using the features of the Zoom platform. At the end of this presentation, there will be a Q&A session. If you want the presenter to address your question, please type it in the Q&A session. If you encounter any technical issue during the webinars, please let us know using the chat box. Our online Master of Professional Studies in Organization Development and Change is designed for professionals who want to gain the skills and knowledge necessary to lead organizational change effectively. Additionally, we offer a PhD program in workforce education and development with concentrations in human resource development and organizational development. Since April 2020, we have established a continuous monthly free webinar series featuring experts from around the world. Today, we are excited to present Unlocking Six Sigma for Greater Success in Your Role by Dr. Wesley Donahue. Dr. Wesley Donahue is an experienced engineer, educator, and improvement specialist with over 4 decades of expertise. He's also a licensed professional engineer, project management professional, and Six Sigma Black Belt. Dr. Donahue helped organizations of all sizes enhance performance, refine priorities, and achieve sustainable improvement. Dr. Donahue is dedicated to practical, timeless principles that create meaningful change. This is a pre-recorded session, but if you have any questions, Dr. Donahue is here. He is live with us, and he will be happy to answer your questions live. For a more detailed overview of his remarkable achievements and contributions, please visit the Eventbrite page of this webinar. You will find additional information about our esteemed speaker there. And now, it's time to present the pre-recorded session. Please enjoy.
Thank you, Marcia. My topic today, unlocking Lean Six Sigma. Some of you may be very familiar with this topic, others maybe not so much. A little bit about me. Marcia gave a little bit of a background. Obviously, I coordinate our online Master of Professional Studies in Organization Development and Change. But before that, though, I had many years in business and industry. You can see some of the roles I've had. And relevant to this presentation today, I'm a registered engineer, Lean Sigma Black Belt, professional PMP. But probably I got most of my experience, though, in this arena from being the director of Penn State Management Development. There, Penn State Management Development was a group of faculty members that traveled around the state of Pennsylvania and beyond doing programs for business and industry. And most of them were management development types and leadership development programs, but we also did lean programs, Six Sigma, project management, and a variety of other things. So what I'm talking about today really comes from a lot of that experience that I had with that. And part of that experience led me to author the book you see to the right hand, Unlocking Lean Six Sigma. And I authored that book because when I picked up different books on Lean or Six Sigma. A lot of them, I mean, you needed to be an engineer or a mathematician to wade through them. But that wasn't my experience in business and industry. Business and industry, a lot of times, some of those things are really overkill, and a lot of low-hanging fruit in organizations could be addressed by using the Lean Six Sigma methodologies. And it's just not a leadership philosophy. It's also a straightforward problem-solving framework and a roadmap to identify waste, apply proven tools, streamline work, and really deliver value to your customers. So, I mean, looking at this, all the things I'm going to talk about in this webinar are included with the templates in the book. The book is also the text for Workforce Ed 451 Lean Sigma, which is one of the courses in our online MPS program. But before we get too far along, I'd like you to take a couple minutes here and, how much do you know about Lean and Six Sigma? As I go through these, just to yourself on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being low, 10 being high. First, can I distinguish Lean and Six Sigma from other continuous improvement methodologies? So if you don't know much about this, it's a 1. If you know a lot, it's a 10. Can I describe and apply common continuous improvement tools to improve processes? Can I create a value stream map that includes key metrics and essential process information? Can I effectively analyze current situations and processes to identify frustrations and problems? Am I familiar with the A3 problem-solving framework and its use in improving processes? Can I develop project report-out presentations that drive actual results? So, addressing those honestly for yourself, did you rate most of them low or most of them high? My experience is many times I'll get a few people that might be high, but most are pretty low. And that's fine. And I typically use this in a classroom to gauge where to spend more time and effort. But these are the things we're going to cover in this presentation today. And it starts out with, in your everyday workplace, have you ever experienced or do experience a process that felt or feels wasteful, inefficient, or frustrating? If you do, I'd like you to list any responses in the chat box, and we'll get an idea from the group here what kind of processes are frustrating to them. I'll ask you this again in a few minutes. But as we move along, when we start looking at frustrating processes, they are fixable with the right tools. Think about some frustrating processes. Here's some ones that came to mind for me. Starbucks, or any coffee shop. You wait in lines, could be a McDonald's. You think about that. Traffic delays, you have to stop and wait. Or anybody in the corporate world, approval processes. And if you're in academia, it's even worse. The redundancies in the approval process is just tremendous. Or looking at your own work area. Is your literature organized? Can you find your brochures? Or does that lower right-hand picture look like your office desk drawer? And think about other processes you've observed. You might not even give them a second thought. Subway. You go into Subway, everything's in the right place. There's consistency. Doesn't matter what Subway you go into, you see the same equipment in the same place. Or a pharmacy. How do they ever find all the prescriptions? They do a wonderful job of doing that. It's like, what's your process? Or a hardware store. You see lots of bins like this with nuts and bolts. Some of them may have a piece of paper in them. Most of them are well stocked, or it might have an empty box. Those are indications that it needs refilled if it's an empty box or a piece of paper. In Lean Sigma terms, it's a Kanban process where obviously you're taking, and it's a visual way to know that you need to refill them. All these processes, I guarantee you, at some time had some Lean Sigma process improvement team behind them to streamline their processes. Now, let me give you a real example here, though. I don't know if you've ever been on a process improvement team, And I had the advantage once of sitting through one of the process teams from a couple of years ago. It was a process team in a hospital, a remote hospital, and they were broken up to teams that looking at different things, but one was looking at the hospital pharmacy. And they looked at this because they thought it was just going to be a routine kind of improvement initiative where they would look at things and so forth. But they found out what was going to be a routine review turned out to be a critical safety intervention. Let me explain. The hospital was the pharmacy was in a remote location of the hospital. It was way off in a corner. And of course, mainly the delays came with some of the processing of the prescriptions. And at first glance, the fix seemed simple. Move the pharmacy closer to the action. But as the improvement team dug deeper into the issues, using the Lean Sigma tools that we're going to talk about, they uncovered a more serious issue: refrigerated medications. Many of them were sitting out far too long. In this particular arena, many times in a hospital, they fill the prescriptions at the beginning of the shift. They're distributed to the locations. And in this case, many of the prescriptions would sit there for the entire shift until they're ready to use them. But you think about, means some of those that needed refrigeration weren't being refrigerated. And of course, there you're risking spoilage and patient safety. So refocusing their efforts, they redesigned and the layout of the area, reworked the workflows and so forth. But they really prioritized the handling of the temperature-sensitive drugs. The result: lower cost, faster delivery, and the prevention of potentially a deadly situation. So that's just one example of a actual Lean Sigma initiative. Moving on, behind every frustrating process is a fix. It's just waiting to happen. And you think about your workday life and all the processes you run into, from recruitment to onboarding to all the things that go on in every kind of business. So please continue to put what frustrating process do you in the chat box as we go along. But here are just some examples in any business environment. But what I'm going to do throughout this process in this presentation, I'm going to use a simple example of making toast. And I'm sure we've all made toast, but all the tools I'm going to talk about can be applied to any industry and any process. So they're kind of universal in that regard. And what happens here is, making toast is a process, but it can be improved. And start thinking about baking toast. These tools, as I said, can be applied to any industry, any process. So the first thing we start thinking about is the outcome of the process. What is it we really want? We're making toast, right? Well, what does a customer want? What does a customer need? And you really start thinking about that customer. And a lot of times we don't give that enough thought up front. Well, is that customer, is it going to be bagels that they're using? Or is it croissants that they're toasting? Is it rye toast or wheat? It does make a difference. So asking and making sure you know what the customer wants is critical right at the beginning. Then looking at your process. Where does your process start? Where does it end? Well, the nice thing about Lean Sigma, you determine that. It may not be the whole process that you're thinking about, might be a little piece, but just for the sake of argument, here I mapped out the process, and we had, do you have to go to the market and to buy bread, unpackage it, or do you already have it? And then you go through here and the steps to make the toast. Again, I just illustrated this for sake of argument. Then with looking at the toast and so forth, what is of value to your customer? Think about what is it they really value, because value, not effort, defines quality in the eyes of the customer. Everything else is waste. So you start thinking of your customer and your process, and the rest is waste. And Lean Sigma really focuses on the customer and what works for them. And just to differentiate for you, the difference between Lean and Six Sigma. Lean, as you can see here, and I use Lean Sigma, instead of saying Lean Six Sigma all the time. And the difference there, Lean Six Sigma is 6 standard deviations from the mean. Anybody that knows the old classic bell-shaped curve. Well, Lean Sigma could be 7 deviations. It could be 2. I'm using Lean Sigma here interchangeably to combine the two, because to me, it doesn't really matter that we're using continuous improvement tools. Lean is reduction of waste and improving the flow. Six Sigma is really their focus of that methodology is reducing variation, improving quality, and perfection. So to me, they're both very similar in what they do. And looking at the principles here uh, of Lean Six Sigma, first is identifying the value for your customer, defining what is it that they really want. The value stream map, we're going to talk about that, because what's of value, what is not, and what are the metrics involved. But you can also see here creating smooth flow, just in time, but then the perfection, the Six Sigma. Not all processes do you want Six Sigma quality. Obviously not with making toast. Now, if this is the airline industry and you're looking at certain defects, maybe you do, but not most manufacturing processes. Most manufacturing processes in the US are 3 or 4 Sigma. So this gentleman here, why do I have him? His name is Edward Deming. And you see his quote, if you can't describe what you're doing as a process, you don't know what you're doing. Well, Edward Deming is known as the father of quality. And back in the 70s, and he was actually a statistician and a mathematician, and he died back in 1993. But back in the 70s, he went to the big 3 automakers in the US, Ford, Chrysler, and GM, and said, you ought to focus on quality. You really need to. And at the time, I can attest to all the cars were big, gas guzzling cars that all rusted out. And he said, you need to focus on quality. If you do that, you'll reduce your costs, you'll improve your quality, you'll improve customer satisfaction, and so forth. Well, guess what? The big 3 automakers ignored him. And then all of a sudden, I don't know if you can recognize that symbol, Toyota. Toyota over in Japan says, hey, come on over and see us. Tell us what you're talking about, which he did. And from there, the rest is history. They've created what's known as the Toyota production process, which is actually the Lean Sigma process. And what it does is, and how it's related to OD, is it tries to force decisions to the lowest level, people doing the work. And that's why it's a very important process. And it's workers deciding how to do things. But Edward Deming in Japan, they named their quality award the Deming Prize. But starting with many of and looking at the processes, here's a flow chart. It's a simple flow chart. Now, you may have seen flow charts in different configurations and so forth, but it really, all it is that it's breaking your process into logical steps, making workflows easier to understand. I've taken the liberty here for the process of making toast. I framed it out here in a half dozen or so, a little more than that, major process steps. Request the prep, obtain the bread, place the toaster, toast it, inspect it, put it on a plate, put the jam or jelly on it. Now, you'll see here, it starts with the request. Very important. I'm going from left to right. And looking ahead, one of the things you have to ask yourself in that request, did I really consider all the stakeholder input? So it's very important to say, oh, stakeholders, who are that? Who could that be? Well, what we're doing here is with this process, we're trying to set clear boundaries for our process. So we're thinking, what is that? Well, this is another tool called a SIPOC diagram. Well, SIPOC, that's a silly name, but you look at the headings up there. Suppliers, S, input, process, output, customers. And what we're doing here is we're saying, okay, what do the customers and suppliers think about this process here? What are the inputs? What are the outputs? And what I've done is for our example here, I've brainstormed them myself, but in an actual Lean Sigma case here, you would have your team, if you have a team, they would brainstorm it to come up with it, or your stakeholders. So you can see here the supplier might be Bakeries might be equipment and so forth, inputs, bread, output, toast, ends, which the waste, some people would say, I like the ends. Of course, it'd be customers, you, me, others. So we're really looking at who needs to be input and who has a little bit of say into the process. And with this, then, process, it sets those boundaries for us and lays the groundwork to uncover what's really happening with our process. Who do we talk to? Who do we observe? And observing processes is really a very important part that's a lot of times overlooked. People think they know the problem in the process when in fact they really haven't taken the time to observe it. What's really happening in the process? What are they going to do about it? And what do the steps in the process tell you? Do they add value or don't they? And what do you do with them if they do? Well, you can either eliminate them, simplify it, or automate it. And what happens a lot of times with processes, though, uh, we try to create the value stream map and we start thinking, what is waste? Well, in Lean Sigma, waste is a lot of different things here. You can see them. And I think one of the biggest things is underutilized talent. We don't ask the people doing the job what they think. Very important part. But it's also the weighting, the excess motion, extra processing, transportation, scrap, waste. So these are all part of the waste stream. And oftentimes people tolerate the waste. Oh, it's not a big deal. Well, it's a big deal over time. So you start thinking about what do you tolerate and what don't you tolerate as far as waste. And in Lean Sigma, one of the biggest things to do is not only observe the processes, to really go to the source and watch it. And the Japanese call this a gemba walk. And it's very important. A gemba walk is really you go to the place where work happens and you observe the process. And while you're there, if it's with teammates, you're communicating with them, asking people doing the job what they think, recognizing the pitfalls and so forth of the process, but you're also documenting what's happening. And not just once, you're going to repeat this process as many times as needed. Not to overlook, though, a lot of times in a process, there's another tool called spaghetti diagram, and you can see from the diagram to the right where it comes from. Oftentimes, it could be you're going to just map out while you're there the flow of your footprints. So here, if I'm making toast and this is what my footprints look like, you can tell it's not very efficient. And a lot of times people call this a string diagram that really pinpoints inefficiencies in the process. So with that, we're seeing the problem, we're looking at what happens to it and so forth. But the real change happens when you begin to act. And with this, it says when you're there at the process, one of the things you want to do in observing is have some kind of worksheet to document what you're really looking at. Now, in the book, I have some templates, but you could just use a plain sheet of paper and make your own. There's nothing sacred about this. Where here, what's the worksheet look like? I'm going to sketch out the process. What does it look? So I'm going to remember. I'm going to put the process steps. I might also say how much time does it take and so forth for each one. But I'm also going to look, what are the categories of waste and put check marks there. So when I come back to this in the future, I can look at what did I say with waste? I might make some notes there. This is standard form. You can use your own form, as I said, but observing and document your process leads to actionable insights for improvement in issues. Now, we're not to the improvement yet. We're still looking at the current situation. And another real scenario here about real situations is adapting your process under pressure. And we all shifted to remote work at one time or another, typically under COVID-19. One call center that I'm keenly aware of, they had a make or break situation. They're all working in the office one day, and the next day, hey, you're all going to work remotely from home. Well, guess what? All those processes they thought they had outlined and documented, there was no documentation. They didn't know what to do. So very quickly, they had to do their virtual gemba walks. They had to get with each other on video conference, say, how do we do this process? It was very easy in the office. If you didn't know something, you asked Joe or Mike or Sally or whatever. But all of a sudden, remotely, it became more important to have documented processes. So they mapped out their processes, clarified the roles, standardized their workflows, and really it was a team effort to do this. And then they built job aids from it. They cross-trained and tried to trim away inefficiency because they said, why we do it this way? And they found that everybody did the process a little bit differently. Well, they tried to standardize what they're doing. The result, the jobs were preserved, customer satisfaction was upheld, and they organized a lot more agile than previously. Today, they're back to work 2 days a week, but they use the same job aids and so forth. So the Gemba walk, it's nice to go out right on the job, but sometimes you have to improvise. In this case, they did it virtually. But back to what factors contribute to a value of a process or service from the viewpoint of the customer and what doesn't. And that's where you're observing and looking at what data or what metrics do you really look at. And that's a key thing because a lot of people look at different metrics. What's your customer look at for toast? You think about it with your flow chart, there's another tool that goes under it. You see what they call a sawtooth diagram. And you'll see the little upside down triangles. Those are delays. But the metrics themselves could be a variety of different things. Performance metrics could be cycle time, throughput, productivity, quality metrics, error rates, defect, benchmarking. But an important thing for Toast is, has your customer satisfied? So are they smiling or are they not smiling? So the metrics can vary depending on the process. And the sawtooth diagram was just one way of keeping track of that. And how you keep track of it is on what we call a value stream map. And this takes your flow chart that you were sketching out and puts it in a more formalized process. Now, what this is, and we're talking about a simple process here, simple framework and roadmap. There are two main documents here. One is a value stream map and the other is an A3 problem solving I'm going to talk about in a minute. We have pads, pre-printed 11 by 17 inch pads that you complete in pencil. At Toyota, they have these pads sitting all around and at the work area. So if the process team wants to work on something, they tear off a sheet of paper, they flow chart it off, and then they go to town on it. So what do? They look at this and they first start with the requests. Well, first, the value stream, they put their flow chart across there from left to right, but starts with a customer. What do they need? And you'll see the symbols up there. There's some symbols on this sheet. And the symbols really aren't standardized, but for lack of anything better, it's good that your team knows and are talking and understand all the symbols. So you can see there some symbols. Then how's it being transmitted? Is it an email? Is it verbal? How's it being transmitted? Then you start your flow chart, going again from left to right. You flow chart your process. While you're doing that, you're taking your metrics, keeping track of your time or cost or whatever until you get over to the left hand or the right hand side. These are typically drawn in hand, typically in pencil. I mean, it's meant to be erased, change them, and go as you go along. A simple process. So here is an example of the simple process for making toast, the value stream map. So you can see here, I got my customer up here. How do I get my instructions? There you see the symbol, it's verbal. Where do I start over here? I start with a request. Then I start keeping track of the time. Well, that request took me about 10 seconds. Then you can see 15-second delay, obtain a bread 5 seconds, another delay, and you can see all of a sudden these symbols coming along the top and the bottom. Well, what do these symbols mean? Well, excuse me, I'm finding out that I had a little trouble locating the bread. It wasn't as organized as I thought it would be. Then I got over the toaster, and all of a sudden you see a problem. You see a glove down below. I'm having little issues here. It's a little burnt. And then I'm inspecting it. You think that's what the glass you're doing down there. Then you see place on the toast. Well, it says it was too light. Excuse me, if it was too light. You see a little workaround. I had to go back and do it again. Also note down below the toaster and the inspection, 120 seconds for each one. Well, overall, the process took uh, 5 minutes and 55 seconds to make the toast. You know, wait time was 55 seconds and the process time 5 minutes. Well, is that a lot? Well, it depends on your customer. Maybe that's fine. But you can see there are some issues. And again, this is a value stream map, and we're trying to get insights on what are the issues with the process. And kind of the keys to the value stream map is keep it simple. We're looking at just simple. A lot of times people with a flow chart will want to put a lot of details there. The A3 11 by 17 paper makes sure that you can only put so many process steps on there, and you might have to consolidate them. It's meant to be a simple process done by hand. Collaborating with your team members, making sure it's just not your opinion, it's your team's opinion. The standard symbols so that you can recognize them. You can make up your own if you like. And then iterate often means, hey, you can change it, do it in pencil if need be. So all this, the next steps, once you create the value stream map is to really look deeper at the process. And here's another example of a real problem you probably all had was you've gone to a conference. Do you pick the cheaper hotel? Or do you pick the expensive one right at the conference? Well, that can be a real problem. So I had this person, actually it was my daughter. She's an optometrist. And she was griping about when she came back from a conference about she'd taken a cheaper hotel a couple blocks from the conference, and it was like $50 cheaper and so forth. And so I said, hey, okay, fine. How about doing a value stream map on your process? So she did. She did. You can see the value stream map that she did. And then you can also see at the top here, here's your problem areas. Visit the conference booths and exhibits. You see storm clouds up above. Travel to the hotel. Sleep at a cheap hotel. Travel to the airport. Well, to hear her talk about it, she, excuse me, she lost over 2 hours in commuting and spent more on, excuse me here a second, and racked up more than $50 in Uber fares. So it seemed like a good idea to stay a little bit further away. She says she'll never do that again. She'll pay the price to stay at the hotel. The other thing, she missed some of the key conference presentations that were important to her. But I don't know how many of you have heard of an A3 problem solving. I mentioned this here in passing. It was the other pre-printed pads, 11 by 17 paper. You may have heard of A3 before. Anybody that's ever made copies, on a copy machine, there's a different size of papers, and you'll see one that says A3. And that's a set 11-inch by 17-inch paper. And again, we make these up in pads because we want people to use them and and make it a simple process where the left side of it is the current state, the right side is the future state. All the things I've been talking about so far are on the left side, current state. And let's stick with that for a few minutes here because the current state, the left side, is where you're looking at the actual situation. What's happening now? You have your value stream map, you're looking at the problems, you're looking at the issue. But are they the root causes of the problem or are they just symptoms of problems? The other thing is maybe your process, most of it's fine, but there's one piece of it that you really want to look at in depth. So that's what you do. You look at that one piece. The right side is going to be the future side and dedicated to solutions. And we'll get to that in a couple of minutes. So the actual A3 problem solving form sheet looks like this. And you'll see again, it's the size of paper, pre-printed, A3. The left side is the current state, right side is the future state. On the left side, you'll see the designations. You write what's the issue, background, current state, what is it? A lot of times you may put the value stream map there. You might flow chart it. The situation, then you're going to look in deeper. What are the issues of the problems? And then at the end, what do you want to improve? What's your goal and target? And with that, you start thinking of that current state. You know, you might have done created your value stream map, but what are the risks of solving a problem without knowing the root cause? Well, the problem with that is a lot of times you may have misdiagnosed the problem, inefficient solutions, wasted resources. So what I'm getting to is that you got to take a little more time in looking at those problem areas and looking at what's really the issue. Then we get into some other tools. One's called the 5 Whys, which I'm going to talk about. And you'll see a Pareto chart there with the biggest line, a red circle around it, because you want to look at the big issues, not the little ones. And with the 5 Whys, I don't know if you've heard of that process or not. It's a very simple process, but one that's really powerful. And it's just one of the continuous improvement tools. Many of them you may have used, others maybe not so much. And what you're looking at is this process or a piece of it that we really want to focus on? Who's involved? Looking at what's happening, what should be happening, what's the problem? And of course, what's the consequences of it? So that's why we're using these tools to get the facts and get to what is the root cause, not the symptoms. I'll hear a lot of times people say absenteeism is a problem. Absenteeism is not a problem. That's a symptom of a problem. What is the real problem? So you start looking at tools. Flow charting is one tool we talked about. Structured brainstorming. We've all done brainstorming. Structured brainstorming is excuse me. Structured brainstorming when you ask people ahead of time to jot down their ideas, then bring their ideas out and ask them to share them with a larger audience. Cause and effect diagram. We're going to touch on that in a minute. Pareto diagrams, surveys, check sheets, scatter diagrams looking for patterns, histograms looking for patterns, control charts. These are all things that could be issues. The root cause, 5 Whys. I mentioned this. I don't know if you've heard this example before, the Jefferson Memorial, where they used the 5 Whys. They had concrete falling off of one of the edges. And they started looking at, well, why is that happening? How do we fix it? What's the root cause of it? So, why? Well, it's being washed several times a week in one area. Why? They had a lot of pigeon droppings over in that one corner. Why? Well, the pigeons come to eat the spiders. Why are the spiders there? Spiders there to eat these midges, which is that little bug there that looks like that come and fly around the monument floodlights. So what did they do? You know, their root cause was the lighting of the monument in the evening attracts the insects. So the solution was just changing the illumination pattern for the monument. Pretty simple example, 5 Whys. We could use that same example on our burnt toast. Again, burnt toast is not a root cause, it's a symptom. You know, 5 Whys. Why is it burnt? Well, could be it stayed in the toaster too long. Could be his toaster's set too high, wrong setting for the bread. Could be we don't always use a default and didn't check. So what do? We need to have some kind of reminder at our toaster for the settings and adjustments. So you think about it, the habit or the prompt to change the toaster settings for different types of bread. So it could be a quick job aid or quick post-it note at the toaster for the type of bread with the setting. So Again, it's just an example of 5 why. Cause and effect diagram, you have a bigger problem where you have lots of different potential reasons. It could be people, methods, materials, or machines. Here you do brainstorming, and then you might do their brainstorming. You might want to say, well, let's put all the brainstorming ideas into categories. And the categories, let's say for our toast example, I already did this one. I put them here, and it could be that obtaining the bread was an issue, which it was. Uh, Putting supplies away, that was a big issue. Distractions, people interrupting you while you're doing it. And then another one there is an old toaster. But then let's not forget the work area. Think of the messy work area. The spaghetti diagram that you could make for it. All these are just ways of looking and analyzing your problem. So you could use a cause and effect diagram. You could write it out. You could 5 whys. But all of this, you're analyzing the situation. What's the data telling you? Just looking at the old toaster, the old toaster. I got to do something about it. But again, we're on the left side. Now we're going to start shifting and looking to the right side and looking at that future. And one of the big things we have to realize here is our ambition. A lot of people are looking at how do we create that ideal situation. That's not what we're after here. Let me repeat, that's not what we're after. We're not looking for ideal, but really what are practical improvements that we can make that we know that if we have people in charge of us, that what will they approve? What actions will they approve? So looking at moving from the current state to the future state, it isn't a leap of faith. It's looking at what are the things we've learned on the current state and then creating our action. So we know that looking at our diagram, the current state, we could have put our value stream map there, but I put the spaghetti diagram because that workflow is pretty unique. And how do we improve upon it? The things we learned from down below, obviously I know the toaster was looking bad and looking at these other delays. So from our analysis, we're looking at that. We're looking at what are the risks or things we need to be careful of or countermeasures. And then from that, you take what would be your implementation plan if you carried out what you want to do. And of course, that's who, what, where, when, and why. And then what are the costs involved? And then what kind of follow-up? That's what we're going to move to for the future state. So looking at the future state, it turns possibility into a plan. How do you get there? First, you sketch out your desired work area. You can see that. I have your toaster. Couldn't find the bread, better organize that differently. Excuse me. Are the supplies in the right place? The distractions. So I sketched it out. The future state visualizes the improvement you want to make. We also look at sustainability. And this a little simple chart here. Sort, straighten, shine, standardize, and sustain. The 5S methodology. I know people that make a living going around doing 5S audits. And what are they doing? Well, they're going around to work areas. There we go. Work areas. And this I created this template up here. You go into a work area and you say, hey, are things sorted out? Are they, and you rate it on a scale of 1 to 5. Or are they straightened? Are they shining? Are they standardized? This is standardizing the work. You're doing this because you created your little future, what you wanted it to look like, and now you're outlining what it is that you want to be done. Again, this is called a 5S methodology. The standardized work plan also then you would look at creating a action. I guarantee you, over in any subway, they're going to have a standardized work plan where they sketched out what the plan, what it should look like. Maybe not our making toast, but they're making toast. What are the individual steps, the times involved, and what are the risks involved? They would have that standardized work plan. These are things you're doing on the future state. We could compare our excuse me, our current value stream map with our future value stream map and look at the differences here. And we could see though that automatically we're going to do something with our organization of our workplace. We're going to get a new toaster. And notice 90 seconds to do it versus 120 seconds. And we don't need the extra time to inspect because the new toaster has measurements on it. So you look at the new system, if we created that value stream map, we're going from 5 minutes, 55 seconds to 2 minutes, 16 seconds. Now, how important is that? Well, it depends on your customer. That may not be the most important thing. For a lot of people, they want to say ROI is very important. Well, it could be. And in this case, 62%, we could create a headline, streamline toast making slashes wait time by over 60%. But down below, is your customer happy? And it could be the happy face or the sad face is really the big important part. But the implementation plan, again, not rocket science. What are you going to do? Who's going to do it? When? How? How's it going to be done? And then any ideas you have for actions. But again, depend on your audience, benefit cost benefit analysis. You got qualitative and quantitative, or cost. If your customer's not happy, nothing's happy. Or is it the dollars? You have to kind of know that. Who's your audience? What are you going to talk to them about? Another example would be kiosks. Again, Lean Sigma I've been involved with where you cut time. I'm always amazed that I go into, it's kind of the Starbucks, and you'll see the people waiting in line, but you go to the Sheets and the Wawas of the world, they have the kiosks or urgent care. You go in and wait and ask you the same questions over and over and over again. I was into one recently where they had a service kiosk. You put the stuff in. They even had one where you could sign up ahead of time. So again, that wasn't made, that change wasn't made by luck. There was a Lean Sigma team behind that came up with those innovations. But back to the cost benefit, what motivates you to act depending on your customer, because we're moving to the report out. If you get the CEOs and so forth, maybe they're interested in the ROI, but maybe not. They may be happier with keeping people happy. So the quality of things is really important. Some some things you have to do because of safety compliance training. You have to really look at your stakeholders and what is really important to them with benefit cost. As I said, you got quantifiable ROI, dollars and cents, but the qualifiable are really important. The intangible benefits, the morale and safety and so forth, and improvement. But this gets into your report outs and how you report out to your stakeholders, whoever you're going to want to convince to do the initiative. And a report out is very important. The Lean Sigma report out is meant to be an informal kind of presentation and follow a structure. First, what's the scope of your project? Value stream map, making sure they know you did your homework. You looked at the root causes. What were your key findings? That's all on the left side of your A3. On your right side, what are you going to do? Who's going to do it? What's the cost? And any supplementary materials that you have. So that's kind of what the report out structure would look like. But it's important to look at, a message that sticks isn't luck. They have to be crafted with purpose, clarity, and the right techniques. First, search-based slides. Well, what is that? That's using a headline and a visual. So in this case, it could be streamlined toast making cuts waste by over 60%. Okay, now show me a picture, Visual aids, pictures worth 1,000 words. Engaging your stakeholders or your target audience in the discussion. And also then making sure that what you have is tailored to that audience. You want to convince them to take the actions that you're recommending. So the visual aids, engaging delivery, the content, very important. So onboarding, another process. I could ask you for any position you've had, how are you onboarded? I can tell you my first onboarding experience was, hey, Wes, we're going to put you with Seth. Seth will teach you everything you need to know. Well, guess what? That's Seth was a good guy and showed me the ropes and so forth. But I ask students who go on internships and co-ops, how was your experience? And some will say, oh, it's wonderful, blah, 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 blah. Others will say it was a waste of time. I put over in a corner, and for the next 3 months, I did XYZ over and over and over again. Then I asked, how are you onboarded? And invariably, the ones that had a really good experience were onboarded in a full-fledged process that took them through the steps, what they needed to do, showed them ahead of time what they were going to get into, and so forth, where the other ones had no clue. Now, if you're going to present that, to stakeholders, well, you'd say, well, you could create a presentation, onboarding delays hurt internships and productivity. Lack of standardization causes delays, which it does. Centralizing, looking at the future, centralized onboarding and pre-boarding can improve efficiency. Small investments yield productivity, and cross-functional teamwork and Lean Sigma can help. Now, the tailored presentation is good, but could just give them an A3. Say, here, read the A3. Tell me, do you approve our process? The root cause is we didn't have any unified checklist for people coming in, no communication plan, lack of accountability. Our recommendations have an online portal, pre-boarding checklist, clear role assignments, pre-start communication. You think about that. Who doesn't want that? So you think about this. You could pilot it for no cost and improve your workflow immediately. And you think about the organizations you work for, how are you onboarded? And the next time, think about it as well. So with that, let's get back to the original question I had for you. What process do you feel is wasteful or frustrating to you? You think about all the ones here: recruitment, onboarding, turnover, employee satisfaction, training programs worthless, uh, performance appraisal process worthless, travel process too long, business proposals too detailed, purchasing process. You think of whatever it is. What was the processes you put down? And then the big question for you is, what are you going to do about it? What are you going to pursue? The choice is yours. And you think about it, you have the power to act. Oh, and particularly if you're in a leadership position where you're going to own the problem and lead to change. And as Wayne Von Dyer used to say, change the way you look at things, and the things you look at will change. And it's very important. And with Lean Sigma, this is very true as well. So kind of in summary here, we talked about process improvement. Lean Six Sigma is more than a methodology. It's a mindset focused on continuous improvement and customer value. But the success depends on taking the right actions. So what do you need to do? Adopt the mindset. Define problems clearly. What is the real problem? What does your customer really, really want? What measures are important to the customer? What really matters to them? Where is the waste? That could be wasted time, wasted intellect. How are you going to, whatever you're going to propose, how are you going to sustain it? How are you going to standardize it? And then, of course, how are you going to engage and empower the teams to make it happen? So with that, I hope that this has given you some insight into the power of Lean Six Sigma. And I hope that you'll adopt this as one of your leadership philosophies. And with that, thank you very much.
So thank you, Professor. There are a few questions, and I know that you will answer the questions live. Do you want me to read the questions, or can you see the questions?
No, I can see them. I answered most of them, but one question that I had, I think relates to everyone. I was asked about how does this relate to innovation and innovation in my organization? And that's a very, very good question. And just as kind of I don't want to say an aside, but I teach a class, Engineering 501, Engineering Leadership for Corporate Innovation. And it's mostly the corporate folks. And there they have a case study. Most of them select their own organization. And when you get to the operations piece, the assignment is, what is the innovation process in your organization? And actually, they use the same tools we've talked about in this presentation. They're required to do a value stream map and an A3 problem solving, and they look at what's their current state. Anybody in manufacturing knows a lot of innovation happens on the manufacturing floor, but that's a very costly way of doing things, and a lot of times very disruptive. So in the process here, they have to analyze what their innovation state looks like today, and then how could it be from a future standpoint. So they have to create their future state map. And I find that the projects are really fabulous. And why this is so important to me was uh, another case. A Fortune 200 company that I was involved with had the same major issue. They thought they were very innovative, and they were, but they knew they could be better. But they also looked at the Toyota process and what was happening, and they decided to form a team, which they did. The team was made up of their division presidents and the top technical person from each division. Those folks were then tasked with the idea of what's our innovation process and what should it be? Well, they came back with a recommendation that they all thought they were pretty good, but they needed some kind of liaison at the corporate level to look at not only what they were doing and some of the overlaps, but what could they do that was beyond the divisions? Well, and why this is near and dear to me, I was the person they hired for that particular role. I was manager of technology for this corporation. One of the best jobs I ever had, and one that to me, I could see it with any organization it would apply. So if you have other further questions, feel free to email me, you know, and in our program, I mentioned Lean Sigma is part of our operation improvement, operational excellence certificate as well. And it's appropriate for any organization, and from an organization development standpoint, is very important because to be successful at it, you ask the people doing the work, you observe the work, and ask the people what they think. So with that, I think our time is up. And thank you very much, but I apologize for coughing so much. It's at just that time of the season. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you for answering those questions. And if you have more questions, as what Dr. Donahue said, you can send them an email, shoot them an email, but you also can send an email to us and we will direct the questions to him. Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Dr. Donahue. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. On behalf of our Workforce Education and Development Program, we hope you enjoyed today's session. If we didn't answer your questions, please feel free to email us or contact the presenter directly. We would love to hear your feedback on today's webinar. Please take a moment to complete the survey using the link in the chat box. This is our concluding webinar for 2024-2025, so this academic year, and we will inform you as soon as possible about the webinar schedule for the upcoming season 2025-2026. Thank you.